Glad to have you back to 1337, the future of podcast. I'm Max, and with me today is Sophia. We're diving into one of the darkest chapters of human history, the Holocaust. You shared a collection of historical accounts, testimonies, and research on this topic. And we're going to help you understand how concentration camps evolved into the extermination camps.
Yeah.
We now associate with the Nazi regime.
It's a complex and sensitive topic. And what we're going to do is explore not just what happened, but how this horrifying transformation took place.
It's one thing to know that the Holocaust happened, but to truly understand the mechanisms behind it, that's where it gets really heavy. And there's this detail about Auschwitz that I found particularly jarring. We often think of it as the ultimate symbol of the Holocaust, but it wasn't initially designed as a death camp at all.
That's right. The sources indicate that the initial plans for Auschwitz envisioned it as a model city for the Aryan race, an industrial center, meant to showcase the ideals of the Third Reich.
It's almost more disturbing to think that a place meant to represent this supposed utopia could be twisted into a site of mass murder.
Yeah.
It speaks to the insidious nature of how ideologies can be manipulated.
Absolutely. And to understand this transformation, we need to look at the parallels between Auschwitz and another camp, Majdanek. Both started with similar purposes, of the housing prisoners of war and political opponents, but their evolution reveals a lot about the Nazi regime's escalating brutality.
Okay, so both camps start out relatively normal, for lack of a better term. Then what happens? The sources mention the construction of gas chambers at Majdanek, disguised as shower rooms, and how they share chilling similarities with those later built at Auschwitz.
Yes, and what's striking is the level of detail and planning that went into these gas chambers. We have eyewitness accounts, diagrams, descriptions of airtight doors, peepholes for observation, even ventilation systems, specifically designed to remove the poisonous gas after each use. It's horrifyingly methodical.
The sources include this one account. For God's sake, terrible. That describes the sounds coming from the crematorium. During gassings, the cries, the banging on the doors, then slowly fading to silence. It's hard to even imagine the terror and suffering those people experienced.
These details highlight the systematic and calculated nature of the extermination process. It wasn't random or impulsive. It was a carefully planned and executed operation. And the evidence of that planning is undeniable.
And that brings us to the sheer scale of the Holocaust. We've all heard the figure of 6 million Jewish victims. But how do historians even begin to calculate a number like that?
That's a question Holocaust deniers often latch onto, claiming the number is inflated or fabricated. But the sources we're looking at detail the meticulous methods used by historians to arrive at this estimate. They use a combination of pre-war census data, Nazi records, and post-war demographic analysis. And it's important to remember, these are independent sources, all converging on a similar figure.
So it's not just a random guess. It's based on a convergence of evidence from multiple sources, all pointing to the horrifying reality of 6 million Jewish lives lost.
Exactly. And the systematic nature of the genocide extends beyond the camps themselves. The sources detail the operations of the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing units, responsible for the deaths of over 1 million Jews in Eastern Europe. These units operated outside the camps, systematically executing entire communities.
It's mind-boggling how organized and widespread this killing operation was.
Yeah.
The sources describe these units traveling from village to village, rounding up Jews, and carrying out mass executions with terrifying efficiency. They documented their actions. This chilling detail, listing dates, location, and the number of victims.
These records, as horrifying as they are, provide further evidence of the systematic nature of the Holocaust. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents. It was a coordinated campaign of extermination carried out across a vast geographical area.
So we have the horrifying accounts, the meticulously kept records, the sheer scale of the genocide. And yet, there are still those who deny that the Holocaust ever happened. How is that even possible?
That's a question that historians and psychologists continue to grapple with.
Yeah.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to take a closer look at the tactics used by Holocaust deniers to distort the truth, and how we can recognize and debunk these dangerous claims. You're right, it is baffling how anyone could deny something so well documented. But Holocaust denial is unfortunately a reality, and it's important to understand the methods these deniers use to try and distort history.
So let's unpack some of those tactics. One I've heard is the no order from Hitler argument. They claim that because there's no single document with Hitler's signature explicitly ordering the extermination of Jews. The Holocaust must be a fabrication.
It's a deceptively simple argument, but it preys on a misunderstanding of how historians work. We rarely have a single smoking gun document that definitively proves a complex historical event. Instead, we look for what we call a convergence of evidence.
Okay, so instead of searching for one magic piece of evidence, historians piece together the puzzle using lots of different sources.
Exactly. We examine eyewitness testimonies, official documents, photographs, physical evidence from the camps, and the patterns that emerge from all these sources tell a clear story, in this case, the story of a systematic and deliberate genocide.
And the sheer scale of the Holocaust,
Yeah.
with the involvement of so many individuals and institutions, would make it almost impossible to orchestrate without some level of centralized planning and coordination.
Precisely. The sources we're looking at detail the meticulous records kept by the SS, the chilling efficiency of the Einsatzgruppen, the construction of dedicated extermination camps, the coordination of transportation networks to move millions of people across Europe. All this points to a level of organization that simply couldn't exist without a high degree of central planning.
And speaking of those records, the sources mention a particularly disturbing example. The reports filed by the Einsatzgruppen, those mobile killing units, they documented their actions in cold, bureaucratic language, listing execution numbers and locations as if they were just routine tasks.
It's a stark reminder of the dehumanization inherent in the Nazi ideology. They reduced their victims to numbers, statistics in a twisted equation. It made it easier to carry out these atrocities when you don't see the individuals, the families, the lives being destroyed.
It's chilling. And another tactic deniers use is the distortion of facts, like the human soap myth. It's this horrific claim that the Nazis mass-produced soap using the fat from their victims.
This myth is particularly insidious because it plays on our deepest fears and disgust. But the sources we're looking at carefully debunk this claim, explaining that while there might be some isolated instances of experimentation with soap production using human remains, there's no evidence of widespread production.
So it's a case of taking a kernel of truth, a rumor perhaps, and twisting it into this outlandish claim to cast doubt on the entire Holocaust narrative.
Exactly. It's a classic propaganda technique, taking a small detail out of context and blowing it out of proportion to sow doubt and confusion.
The sources also mentioned the forced confession argument. Deniers claim that the confessions of SS guards and other Nazi officials admitting to their roles in the Holocaust are unreliable because they were coerced by the Allies. But that doesn't seem to hold up under scrutiny, does it?
No, it doesn't. Firstly, many of these confessions are corroborated by other evidence, including eyewitness accounts from survivors and physical evidence found at the camps. And secondly, many of these individuals had ample opportunity to recant their confessions after the war, when there was no longer any pressure from the Allies, but they didn't.
So they stood by their stories, even when they were no longer under duress. That suggests a level of authenticity for remission.
Precisely. These weren't just coerced words. These were confessions rooted in the horrifying reality of what they had witnessed and participated in.
We've talked about how deniers try to dismiss the evidence of the Holocaust. But what about the motivations behind their denial? What are they trying to achieve by pushing these falsehoods?
To understand that, we need to delve into the ideological roots of Nazi thinking. The sources take us back to the early 20th century, exploring the influence of eugenics movements and the growing obsession with racial purity.
It's interesting to see how these ideas, which were initially promoted by intellectuals and scientists in many countries, were twisted by the Nazis to justify their racial hierarchy and persecution of those deemed undesirable.
It's a chilling reminder that even seemingly scientific or intellectual movement can be corrupted and manipulated to serve dangerous agendas. And that's what happened in Nazi Germany. They took these ideas about racial purity and twisted them into a horrific ideology that led to the systematic extermination of millions.
And it's even more unsettling when we consider that Auschwitz, the place that's become synonymous with the horrors of the Holocaust, was initially conceived as a model Aryan city. It shows how easily even seemingly positive goals can be warped and twisted to justify unspeakable acts.
Absolutely. And that's why understanding the evolution of Nazi ideology is crucial to understanding the Holocaust. It wasn't just a sudden eruption of violence. It was a culmination of years of poisonous rhetoric, systematic dehumanization, and the gradual erosion of basic human decency.
So it's not just about understanding the what of the Holocaust, but the how and the why. And that brings us back to the importance of critical historical analysis. We can't just accept narratives at face value, especially when dealing with such a sensitive and complex topic.
Exactly. We need to question sources, look for corroboration, and be wary of attempts to simplify or distort the truth. And that's especially important in today's world. We're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
It feels like we're all amateur historians these days, trying to sift through the noise and figure out what's real and what's not. So what are some key takeaways we can use to evaluate information, especially when encountering potentially biased or distorted historical narratives? So we've been talking about how to be more critical consumers of information, especially when it comes to history. What are some concrete steps we can take to avoid falling prey to these distortions and manipulations?
One crucial skill is learning to distinguish between legitimate historical revisionism and unfounded denial. Revisionism isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's a vital part of the historical process.
So not all revisions of history are attempts to rewrite the past for nefarious purposes.
Not at all. Legitimate historical revisionism involves re-examining existing interpretations, considering new evidence, and offering alternative perspectives. It helps us refine our understanding of the past and challenge long-held assumptions.
But how do we tell the difference between that and the kind of Holocaust denial we've been discussing?
Denial, on the other hand, involves the outright rejection of well-established facts and the deliberate distortion of evidence to fit a predetermined agenda. It's not about adding nuance or complexity to our understanding. It's about trying to erase or minimize a historical event that makes certain people uncomfortable.
So it's about recognizing the intention behind a revision. Is it a genuine attempt to enrich our understanding of history? Or is it a deliberate attempt to rewrite history to fit a particular narrative, often one rooted in prejudice or ideology?
Precisely. And that's where critical thinking comes in. We need to evaluate the sources, look for corroboration, and be wary of cherry picking or the omission of key evidence. Deniers often focus on isolated details, taking them out of context, and ignoring the overwhelming weight of evidence that contradicts their claims.
It's like trying to argue that the earth is flat. Because you can't see the curvature from where you're standing. You're ignoring the vast body of scientific evidence. That proves otherwise.
Exactly. And when it comes to the Holocaust, there's a mountain of evidence. From eyewitness testimonies and official documents to the physical remnants of the camps themselves. To deny this reality is to turn a blind eye to the truth.
The sources we've been exploring highlight several of these denial tactics, like the no order from Hitler argument, the distortion of facts, like the human soap myth, and the dismissal of evidence, like the forced confession argument.
And we've discussed the importance of looking for a convergence of evidence, relying on corroborated sources, and recognizing the difference between legitimate historical revisionism and unfounded denial. These are all essential tools for navigating the complex world of information, not just when studying history, but in all aspects of our lives.
Especially crucial in today's digital age, where misinformation spreads like wildfire online. It's easy to get caught up in echo chambers and filter bubbles, surrounded by information that confirms our existing beliefs, even if those beliefs are based on falsehoods.
That's why it's so important to cultivate a critical mindset, to constantly question what we're told, and to seek out diverse perspectives. We need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions and be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
It's almost like being a detective, piecing together the puzzle of history, but with the added challenge of recognizing when someone is deliberately trying to mislead us.
That's a great analogy. And just like detectives, we need to be meticulous, objective, and always open to new information.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a much better understanding, not just of the Holocaust itself, but also of the importance of critical thinking and historical analysis.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, understanding history isn't just an academic exercise. It's about equipping ourselves with the knowledge and skills to be more critical thinkers and more responsible citizens.
It's about recognizing that history isn't static. It's an ongoing conversation, constantly evolving as new evidence emerges and new perspectives are offered. It's up to us to participate in that conversation, thoughtfully and critically.
And to never forget the lessons of the past, especially when it comes to recognizing the dangers of intolerance, hatred, and the dehumanization of others.
Well said. If you'd like to explore more deep dives on a variety of topics, be sure to visit 1337podcast.com. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of a difficult but essential chapter of human history, strength and honor. I am Spartacus.
Thanks for watching. Tap into 1337podcast.com.